Nadgauda, he's with MetLife.
Yep.
Sharmila Ravi, Capital One, and Ratnakar Lavu with Elevance Health. So we have a lot of variety. We're going to get into our panel and look forward to the reality check in terms of what the market is seeing. Maybe Nick, and actually everybody, will kick this off. Intelligent workflows, scaling intelligent workflows. What comes to your mind when I say that term?
I think there's two pieces to it, right? One is like using AI to build things that drive automation. And I think that, to your point about like the deterministic workflows, like that's a big component. You can think of like your coding agents, in that like what happens at runtime is very like deterministic. And then the other side of it is things that run that use AI to make decisions. And both of those, people use those terms interchangeably, but they really are two different things. And both of them are under the intelligent workflow banner.
What does that mean to you, Sharmila?
That's a great question. I've been thinking about it since you sent the questions over. One of the things that we think about at Capital One is that as you think about the intelligent workflow, this is where AI is coming into play to be your partner and your collaborator. So as Niraj pointed out, the cost of it, you also need to be careful on where you apply it. So we are looking at intelligent workflows in two ways. Where can we improve our customer experiences, reduce the friction as one flow? And the second flow would be where do we want to improve our developer productivity and literally take care of the mundane tasks so the developers are more focused on the more creative problem solving and the subject matter expertise. As we said earlier that, I think Liz and others pointed out, that is in shortage.
Ratnakar, your take.
So for us, I think it spans across the full enterprise itself. So we start with actually the patient or the member experience piece of it. How can we, to Nick's point, both automate and build more intelligence and decision-making into the process to help the patients and members navigate the complexity of the healthcare ecosystem. The second is, between us and providers, how do we make the entire system and process much more simpler so that they don't focus as much on administrative work that they do today, but really focus on outcomes. And then the third, I think, is a tremendous amount of opportunity that we see to actually elevate how our associates provide the best service for our members and providers, and not focused as much on the mundane tasks, but really focused on providing value for our members and providers.
Great. Now, in terms of getting started, there's a big change in architecture here, moving from legacy to an AI system.
Yeah.
What is involved in that, Nick?
I mean, obviously, we have a lot of legacy. We're an insurance company, and I think everybody here probably has a lot of legacy. And I forget the gentleman's name from Citizens. I think they've been on a big program similar to what we've been on to try and modernize our tech stack. But like the biggest change in my mind is like in the past when you would have to modernize a platform because of risk, because it's old, it's unsupportable or whatever, you would try and couple like a business transformation with that. So it turned into like a humongous effort. Re-engineer the business process and upgrade the platform. And now, because of the way the coding agents work and some of the newer technologies, you can basically rewrite the platform in a modern tech stack without having to touch the business process. You can choose to couple them, you can choose to decouple them. And I think that has been a really big change in our viewpoint. So we're focused on business modernization, making our customers' lives better, but at the same time, the risk angle, we're just basically rewriting platforms. So keeping them the same, but just on a modern tech stack. It's basically separating those two things. And that's been a fundamental change in the way we look at things now.
And Sharmila, taking this same topic, when has your journey started in terms of shifting to an AI architecture or infrastructure?
I think at Capital One, it started much long ago before I was even there. In 2016, we got out of the data centers and moved into cloud fully. And that is the biggest thing from Capital One architecture perspective and their technology journey. Not only that we moved into the cloud, which is, at that time was hard, but the hardest part is that we looked at our capabilities. What are all the things that as a financial services we're providing to the customers? And we looked at them as a platform journey. So we're in the cloud. We have platforms of all common capabilities. Our compute is in the cloud. Then we looked at the data aspects of the company. And data is critical, analytical, and your AI journey really, really starts with data. I don't have to tell you guys that, you're all nodding. So one of the things that we really took a look at is, do we know our data? Do we know that how clean it is? Do we know the lineage? Can we say that this is the source of truth that we can trust? And with that journey is where Capital One started. Now that is powering our AI journey. We feel like we're not actually taking AI as a tool. We're building the AI. Because we have the data, we're in the cloud, we're platforms, and we took the similar approach when it came to AI. We're not just using AI, we built an AI platform that was showcased publicly in the past. So it was one of those multi-agentic AI-enabled workflow that we have showcased, and we are using the same platform that has open source models, but customized for our data. So proprietary data is a proprietary AI win, is our thought process. So we don't look at it as use case by use case, how do we do this? We're looking at it as capabilities across the enterprise, and using our enterprise platforms, using our clean data, we're powering it to make sure that our outcome is big enough to justify the ROI and to justify the business outcomes.
And Ratnakar, on this topic of breaking the data silos in the healthcare industry, has this been the hardest technical shift for you, or does something else come to mind?
You know, I feel like you never get out of legacy fast enough. There's a lot of complexity in large organizations like ours, right? So no matter how much you try to consolidate data, you move into the cloud and other things. So our AI journey, started with experimentation in kind of 24, implementation in 25, and scaling right now in this year. And what we're finding is there are certain things that actually break, fundamentally break. So take, for example, you need highly robust governance processes across. And then we started with AI implementations or solution. Now you get to agentic. You have to fundamentally continue to reevaluate your governance processes. You also have to think about data very differently than what it is. Do you consolidate, or do you actually build a semantic layer or a data mesh across the data silos that are there? Do you actually think about, in terms of cloud itself and cloud compute, how do you actually think about experimentation? Can you create a quick private cloud very quickly? So there's a lot of things that are also kind of breaking as we are trying to scale. So we're having to rethink the entire stack itself and then continue to evolve it.
If I could just jump in on the data point, we've been on this journey to MetLife to kind of modernize our data, get it into like modern data hubs. But one thing that's shifted now is like the priorities that we thought we had when we started now need to be like reworked in sort of real time. So if somebody comes up with an interesting use case that we want to put in, something that might not have been as important in terms of like data quality, data cleanliness in one area, now that becomes really important. So you need to like be able to pivot really quickly. So the kind of nimbleness with AI experimentation is causing all the downstream priorities to have to change a lot more rapidly than maybe in the past.
On this AI experimentation, maybe Sharmila, if you can point to cases that are bubbling to the top in terms of giving you business value.
I can touch on few. At Capital One, we looked at the common problem that all our call center agents face. They get a whole wide variety of questions from the customers, and customers are in distress or calling us in an anxiety mode and might be rushing the agent to answer quickly. And that is the moment of need for the customer, and we want to make sure that we show up well. And at the same time, our call center employees have thousands of documentation to go through and find out what is the right answer for this particular problem. So in our agentic platform, we built a service called Agent Assist. What this does is that as a customer calls in, as employee picks up the call, it is automatically presenting the options for the agent based on what the customer is saying. So it is already understanding the context of the customer, reasoning with the data it has, and be able to determine at the end what is the best answer to give to the customer. So what is this doing is that actually helping both our call center employees to do a very good job in terms of meeting the customers in their need and giving the customer the right solution. And with this, we actually had a 93% success rate that our employees that answered the call said it was right 93% of the time versus me. That is like a great training tool if you think about the newest employees coming in, and the return on investment when we scaled it to 20,000 plus call center employees. You can imagine the benefits of it and the amount of time those employees need to spend on the phone helping it. So that is one use case that is more focused on the return on investment and a common capability across all of our businesses within Capital One. The second use case we looked at is that how do we make sure that we create an experience to the customers that's beyond what's available to them today. And we deployed this in our auto loans business. As Capital One has an auto loans business, we work with both the dealers and the customers. So we took a single conversation from a customer, and that will tell our agentic platform everything it needs to know to be able to figure out what's the make and model that the customer is looking for, comparison of prices in their area, and the dealer's costs in there, and schedule a test drive, and also schedule, a consult with the sales agent if that's what they're looking for. So this is like taking an input from a single conversation, understanding it, doing the comparison, and making an action, and checking back with the customer. So those two are the experiences that we rolled out, and it's all in our common platform, so we can take the same experiences and bring it to others. Those are just to name a few.
Okay. And Ratnakar, maybe from your experience so far to date in terms of agentic journey, where is it today? Where are you seeing the use cases, and how do you see it unfolding over the next 2 years?
Yeah, so as I said, we're in the scaling process this year, and I'll give you a couple of examples. So AI is actually enabling us to reimagine how we bring experiences to life. So for our members, if all of us have experienced healthcare, it's pretty complex. And so think about your benefits, then you have to find a provider, and then you have to schedule appointments with the provider and other things. And then you want to know what exactly you're going to pay for that service. So we've created, leveraging AI, and if you look at your benefit, there's a lot of pages in that if you want to try and understand that. So if let's say a member wants to check on knee surgery and whether it's covered in their benefits or not, we now have in our app, our Sydney app, you actually can go and you can interact with an AI agent that says, you can type in and say, is knee surgery covered? It actually comes back and it says it's covered and what you're going to pay for it. Not only does it do that, it then says, okay, I'll actually connect you with the right provider who can provide quality service for that surgery, because we also have 500 data points that we actually look at between provider and member, personalize that experience. So we were not able to do this in the past. And this is where technology actually is helping to create these robust experiences. Where I see this going in the future is continuing to build on this AI agentic experience and creating a personalized agent for the member itself and their healthcare journey. And so basically what we want is to drive to the right outcomes for the member. And that's where I see a lot of this going.
Interesting. And Nick, maybe you can give perspective on these agents that are facing customers and how you're balancing the governance aspect.
Yeah, so I mean, similar to what we talked about here, I think a lot of our AI deployment has been in the three areas: call center, claims, and developers, right? And especially and all three of them, it's not a coincidence, all three of those are very repeatable, they're very measurable, so it's like a really, targeted deployment. So in the call center, we've been able to reduce our call center volume by 30%. 9 times the volume of claims are auto-adjudicated now than they were in the past, and that's all through agentic deployment. Where we see it going forward is that sort of expanding, but we put like a pretty good governance process in place. And initially it was painful, I'll be honest with you, because it touches legal, it touches compliance, it touches architecture. So we've got a lot of different teams that are involved, and in many ways, like, you're trying to get AI in, but you've got like a manual process to actually approve the AI between the different departments. So, we stitch those together into a common workflow, are using AI now to try and streamline that process, and that has really streamlined what we're doing. But like the key point I think that made it a lot easier was really understanding where AI is used and where AI is not used. So in a lot of what we found is in a lot of our use cases, when we created some automation or tried to simplify things, there actually was no AI in the actual runtime. So once you realize that, like those cases become like much, there's no risk essentially. You can kind of approve them automatically. So what I would encourage everybody is as you think about governance and you think about risk, really understand what the tools are doing and see where the risk is. And then maybe you're over-engineering your governance in some ways. And then you could simplify things pretty easily.
And what's the timeline associated with building this up?
It's probably a year and a half we've been at it. But now we've got this concept of what we call like green zones. So anything that comes in that meets the low risk case, kind of like sails through. And anything that needs more approval, human review, risky, et cetera, goes to like another more manual process. And I think that's really unlocked a lot of things for us.
Okay, maybe we pivot to a little bit. We talked about data silos and breaking that barrier. How about the quality and integrity of data, Sharmila? How are you managing that at Capital One?
I think it's an ongoing journey. As I said, we have our data platforms, and we do, have a data lakes and ensure that we have one source of truth across the data. But it is an ongoing journey that you want to ensure that you're looking at it. Because at the end of the day, if your data is not clean and you don't know for sure its validity of it, LLMs or any agentic agents aren't going to produce anything better. We all know in technology, garbage in, garbage out kind of scenario, and it would be very costly in this aspect. So knowing your data, knowing the lineage, knowing that you don't have any duplication is an everyday job.
Okay. And now let's look at a little bit about the human in the loop in healthcare. I'm assuming there's a lot of, combination of AI and technology and human oversight. Ratnakar, if you could opine on that kind of.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So we're a highly regulated industry, right? So when we design our AI solutions, there's a lot of thought that goes into that. Not only we start with the governance elements of it, we want to be more transparent. We want it to have explainability as AI is making certain decisions. We actually have a platform that kind of has guardrails, bias testing, hallucination, and all of that, right? So we have a framework that through which we build actually the solution. But as we are building and designing solutions, we think about where AI should make a decision and where a human actually should intervene in a decision. And I'll give you an example. In prior authorizations, our goal and objective is to accelerate approvals on behalf of the provider, right? Because the provider is submitting a prior auth, and we want the prior auth to get approved as fast as we can if they have the relevant data. But what we don't want the AI to do is make denial decisions. So if the AI cannot make a decision, an approval decision at that point, because it doesn't have sufficient information and other things, we actually route it to a human, and then the human actually reviews that and then works with the provider to either get to approval or some other decision. But that's the kind of the framework that we use. But that actually has to start from the design, or what our kind of our learnings are. You just can't go in and build an AI solution out. You have to be very thoughtful and how you build it out, and actually map out the processes. Where does a human come in? Where do you need human oversight? Even if they are not making the decision, where do you need human oversight? Where do you need human auditing in the entire process?
Nick, is your AI denying insurance claims?
No, it's not.
Okay.
I think we're also a regulated industry. We are also taking a very similar approach. I would say the bulk of where we're focused is on making the claims processing simpler. So you think about the amount of paper you get, the amount of manual stuff that people need to do, all that input into the claims agent, we're trying to streamline all that. But at the end of the day, it's our claims agents that actually make the right decision.
Okay. just checking. Sharmila,
Very timely topic, I guess.
yeah. Sharmila, let's talk about budgeting for AI. How do you think about that, and where does it come from?
The way we look at in Capital One is based on our imperatives and what is it that we're trying to achieve at the destination. If you're trying to look at like incrementally, I think it will be hard to budget anything in the AI world. You need to look at it and say, this is the amount of call volume. If you're looking at it from call center perspective, here is what I want to reduce, and here is the journey I'm going to be on. Like coding could be pretty fast, and you may be getting the features out there, but in a regulated industry, you need to make sure that you are at the right governance and monitoring and tooling. So that will take its time. What is your threshold for any risks in there is what comes into play. So it is one of those journeys that you need to define your destination and then want to be marching towards it. And the efficiencies that you gain through it is what the budgeting process is.
Can I add one point on budgeting?
Yes.
Because I think it's like actually a very fascinating topic because you wouldn't think budgeting is that fascinating, but it kind of is, because you're really moving from like CapEx to like an OpEx model, right? And at least for us, right, and I would imagine for everybody, like you've got cost centers, you've got annual budgets, you've got all that sort of stuff, right? And now you got this like variable cost, and you got to figure out who and where you're going to like park that variable cost. So like that is like a big discussion that we have like constantly, like what's the right way to do that? And I would imagine a lot of people are probably grappling with that same topic.
Yeah.
It's a challenge to find
Yeah.
a separate cost center for it. You got to kind of think
Okay.
of a self-funding aspect from the technology perspective, saying that what am I going to reduce in terms of my OpEx so I can self-fund, what you need to do.
Ratnakar, how about your input on your measurement of ROI for your monetization effort?
Yeah, so tokenomics is real.
Yeah.
And we watch it carefully because I think your point that you made, I do think the cost structures are going to change fundamentally in large enterprises as we continue to roll out AI more at scale. The key question that I think about is, I like the way you kind of showed it. What is the return on the investment? Okay, token costs are increasing, but is there truly a return on the investment for that increase? And then are there opportunities within an enterprise where you can get offset? So for example, we go in and look at the entire landscape of technology and then continue to optimize that to offset the token cost increase. But then the bigger thing I think that we're really focused on is the value creation within the enterprise. And we see tremendous amount of potential in terms of return on investment. By the way, we measure this carefully. The call center example is a great one, wherein when you actually automate and put intelligence into the desktop or the information that the call center agent has to use, they service them much better at higher kind of intelligence and value, and then that is leading to better NPS scores. So there's a whole set of parameters that you can actually look at and monitor, and you have to do that to see how is this cost yielding in terms of what results it's actually yielding.
Okay. We're coming up on time, but I want you guys to give your advice on the biggest pitfall to avoid so far in your terms of your agent investment or your AI journey.
Go ahead.
All right. I think for us, at least, there was a top-down strategy, which is essentially kind of re-engineer big processes, inject AI at the right points. And I think adoption was not, an issue there because you kind of forced adoption. Then you've got like the bottoms-up strategy, which is like roll out tools to people, make them useful, try and get people to use them, sort of like your Claude or GPT kind of thing. And what's happening now is like those things are meeting in the middle. And like with new tools like Cowork and Frontier, like how that stuff in the middle is going to meet is going to be really tricky. So we're spending a lot of time thinking about that, and I would encourage everybody to think about that before you roll those things out pretty broadly.
From our perspective, and I'll speak also as a technologist, when a tool is given to you, something new, exciting, everyone wants to experiment with it. You end up doing a lot of demos. You will see a lot of cool stuff. But then again, if you have over 100,000 technologists, they're going to produce 100,000 different type of demos for the same exact work. So I would caution that the excitement on adopting, especially in the technology space, is not always positive, and it could be costly, both from the time perspective and the tool cost perspective. So one of the things that we did run into and then learned is how do we build a reusable skills for our associates. So not every engineer has to figure out how to get my code reviewed for the enterprise standards. Not everyone has to build something new for that type of a mundane task. How about that we actually build an enterprise level skill and deploy it to all of our engineers so they're not spending time on it. So watch out for the demos. They all look cool, but they will cost you quite a bit of developer time and the tools before it gets to the production. So giving them some guidance, giving them some reusable skills that they should all be adopting, and creating new things should be reserved for creative problem solving would help all of us.
Yeah, just tagging on to that, I think every enterprise, by the way, every individual, I think, should lean into AI. But then there's also this notion of FOMO that's going on. Like, there's so many vendors and partners who are coming in and saying, oh, by the way, I've solved the world's problems and stuff. I think just be extremely thoughtful, because I've seen a lot of technology where they said they can solve many problems and other things, but it's actually pretty complex. I mean, you have to do it extremely thoughtfully as you kind of build and implement AI solutions within large enterprises. And then the second thing that I would say is change management.
Yeah.
Change management in companies, especially when you're redesigning processes, implementing AI, don't underestimate that. It is one of the most complex things. Actually, it's actually not even the technology, it's the change management that's the most complex things that we have found, because taking people who cannot see the future and the vision and then saying, here's the art of the possible, and then taking them through that journey takes a while, and then getting them educated takes a while, and then having them adopt it and embrace it also takes a while.